The slogan, America First, America Only, anti-gospel. There's been a deluge of negative comments pertaining to something that Daily Wire conservative commentator, at least that's the way that the company that he works for describes him, and he has described himself before, had to say just a few days ago. A lot of Christians, some have said that the replies, some of these antagonistic replies toward what Walsh said in one of his latest podcasts were more bots on X than anything else, although I reviewed the comments that appear on that clip that he plays on his X account, and it seems as if a few of the comments that were left on that clip that we'll play for you shortly were from genuine accounts. Plenty of Christians have said that it is an untenable position to have with respect to the gospel. And we're going to ask the question this evening and answer it, as well as to whether or not America First, America Only. And by the way, it's not just something that we contextualize for ourselves. We also have to understand this in the context of Christians that live in other countries, whether it be Hungary first, Hungary only, Russia first, Russia only, China first, China only, the believers in those countries. Is that something that aligns with the gospel, or is it unchristian, or is there something altogether different operating in these sorts of comments that seek to undermine what Walsh and other commentators have posited? We'll have more to say on this edition of Irrespective. Welcome each and every one of you to this new episode. As always, our names haven't changed. They won't change. My name is Gio. This is my father, Jesus.
Good evening, friends. Even though Mr. Walsh does not use the following words, I am going to use them because I believe this is at the center of the matter. Dual loyalties. Could you be involved in something that requires dual loyalties? Well, Jesus spoke about that when he said you can't have two masters. And so he covered a lot of ground in the small statement that he put out, or at least in the clips that we will be showing you. And I like his comparison. What about if we bring it to the family? If you had to save one of your kids, or 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, which one would you save, your child or the group of 1,000 or 1,000,000? I think at times, Gio, we want to give the appearance that we are really spiritual. So we'll go, I guess if I have to sacrifice my child for the sake of the million, I guess I would do that. But you and I had a conversation with a world-renowned archaeologist. And we brought up the situation of these girls that were offered to the ravenous and raging homosexuals over in Sodom and Gomorrah.
And by none other than their father.
Yes. And we asked this world-renowned Bible preacher and archaeologist, now, isn't that like almost evil? Isn't that wrong to offer your daughters? And he said, what you don't understand is that this was the custom. So according to this individual who is world-renowned, I'm not going to throw out the name. I know people are itching to find out. I'm not going to give you the name, but you've heard of him.
He's world-renowned.
And you've heard of him, and you probably have books and the rest, because he is very well-known. And when any and all things are happening in the area of we found a stone, we found a ring, we found a tidy bowl, he is one of the consultants. So he said, yeah, the father had to offer the daughters because that is the custom. And then we asked, so if this is the norm, this is what you are embracing, then we should take a look at the norms of our society and go according to that and not according to the Bible.
Right.
Because you have to ask yourself, what were the daughters thinking the minute they heard dad say, I'm going to offer you to the pack of homosexuals that we have out there so that they can have their way with you? And then the other way to corner this individual is, okay, so I'm going to send a couple of young missionaries from the Mormons or maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses that knock on your door on your Saturdays or Sundays so they can have their way with your daughters.
Yep.
Well, no, like I said, it's a custom. All right, so then if it's a custom, if it's something that, today's society is doing, then we should embrace abortion and the rest. In other words, the argument fell apart. Because what happens, folks, is sometimes we want to express ourselves in a way that hides our humanity. I don't know why we would do that, and we'll have verses to cover that. But that, in essence, is what I see the statement that he brought forth, and the people having issues with saying, can you really have a dual loyalty, a functioning, a real dual loyalty? And I'm going to go on the record and say no.
I think also that pertaining to the example that you just gave, it is a glaring thing that Christians face on a daily basis and they don't correct it. And it is this: a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, and a disinterest to acquire those said things to be consistent in one's faith. Because let's face it, I think if we were to see any father, using the example that you're using from the Old Testament of Lot offering his daughters to the Sodomites, whom were demanding to be with the messengers, the angels that God sends to Lot so that they can be freed from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the way that this highly esteemed and what was it, world-renowned archaeologist, the way that he explained it is those were the ethics back then, and in essence we can't judge that because those were the ethics then. But again, if we believe as Christians that God is the same today and forevermore, and we can't take that position, because then we would actually side with the secular humanists, whom, as you were just saying, they posit that it's not God, it's not morality external to us, it's whatever the society, the 51%, the more simplified argument, whatever the 51% says, that is right, that is good, that is morality.
You and I, and all of the people that are watching this podcast that have read their Bible, they all know that Lot knew what was going on.
Right.
If he wanted to do the deep love thing, all he had to do was offer himself.
Right.
And maybe the Sodomites would have taken him.
Right. Right. Nobody offers his daughters.
I don't want to offer myself to the Sodomites.
I don't want to be sodomized.
So, you know, but you know, sometimes we want to make ourselves seem like, look how spiritual I am.
Right. But there's also another aspect to that, and that's the one that I'm analyzing here, which is that Christians do not take the time, neither are they interested in finding out, or rather ironing out, eliminating these discrepancies from their views, which leaves them open to these sorts of criticisms because they are adequate criticisms. There's a contradiction there. And then if we don't, as it were, align ourselves in truth, then we have the potential, as in the case that we're giving, to actually malign God's character in all of this. Because as we were saying, and using the example you just gave, it makes it very evident in that instance that what Lot did was wrong. And it is still a part of Christian ethics that what Lot did, and if any other father were to imitate that example, it is wrong, it is immoral, it is reprobate. So here's the point, and this
Plus,
is...
Lot had a history.
Exactly.
Choose the plains or choose the hills. I'll take the plains. You're not even supposed to be in this picture.
Abraham was his benefactor.
You're not supposed to be in the picture, and here you are. So he's showing his true colors all along. Anyway.
Abraham was his benefactor. Now, let's play the clip in question here that garnered so much controversy, which some people rightfully pointed out. Why would Americans be so perturbed with Walsh's words here? But it goes back to something you just said. Unfortunately, sometimes, well, no, not sometimes. Let me amend my statement. In many instances, Christians can be their own worst enemies, especially by the way that they interpret things, by the way that the sanctimony comes out, and it just makes Christianity and Christians themselves look like fools.
Here's to call this just a few years ago virtue signaling.
Well,
I guess some people are still at it.
To your point, here's the clip in question.
What we want is for someone to unashamedly and single-mindedly advocate for Americans and Americans only. We want someone to say, you know, the only thing I care about is helping Americans. The only people I care about in the world are Americans. And we don't want to just hear that, but we want to see the action taken as well. You know, I've seen some people on social media say, hey, it's America first, but not America only. I disagree. I think it is America only. It's like I said months ago, I consider myself an American chauvinist. America first, America only, I'm an American chauvinist. I don't care about it. This is the only thing I care about. America should be the only thing you care about, especially as a leader of the country.
Now, it was the last portion, more specifically, of that declaration that Christians took issue with. I'm going to share using our account on X, Irrespective's account on X. I'd like to show something to the audience because we bookmarked a few of the responses because the comments thread was pretty long on this video. It was a widely shared video, but here's a sampling of what appears here. You'll have these accounts. I'm not going to go by them by name, but not America only. That is not a Christian concept. As a Christian, that would be an automatic disqualifier for me. America first, America only is manifestly at odds with the Christian faith. This can't be squared. You'll notice a trend here, folks, that these are simple declarations without any explanations, because one would expect that if you're going to make this counterclaim, then you have to provide evidence as to why your position is tenable and the person you're criticizing, their views are not. Walsh explained, in a sense, why he believes America first, America only is the proper position, the moral position. Well, they're just stating these things ipso facto, as if just stating it proves their point. That's not the case.
This is the position for Americans.
He's
not saying that Colombians should embrace this. They should embrace it for Colombia.
Exactly. It's sad to see your emptiness on display. There's the ad hominem, of course. Matthew, turn to the Lord with all your heart. What? This is absolute foolishness at this point. Then again, it makes a lot of sense because the guy has the Israeli flag on there, so you can see where he's coming from maliciously.
I've got a verse for the Israeli friend there, Joe.
Sure.
But I'll wait for the proper time within this podcast.
There's the last one that we have a sampling of. This is not aligned with a biblical worldview, just as we did in World War II. We are called to be a force against evil. Let me address this first and foremost by getting at the very basis for the accusations against Walsh. For many years, the church, more specifically, we're talking here to evangelical Christians, some call themselves Protestants, however you want to denominate yourself. We're talking here about Christians whom they call themselves Christians, but they're not Catholics, they're not Eastern Orthodox, what have you. Evangelical Christians is the way the demographers and the news media will refer to these people. They have been browbeaten into believing, and this is the essence of where this commentary comes from. Some of you might disagree, but I'm going to be able to prove my point substantively. It is the Christian position, it is the gospel-centric, it is the Christ-centered position to do unto others at your own expense. I want to explain that differently. The gospel thing to do is to look out for the well-being of your neighbor at the expense of your own well-being, the expense of your family members, the expense of your community. In other words, what Christians hear and have been taught with loving your neighbor as yourself is that you have to prioritize your neighbor because that's what Jesus did. That is the simplest explanation that I can offer to redeem time as to how this has been preached from the pulpits. So what you're seeing here in these commentaries is a reflection of that very same idea, doctrine, dogma, however you want to call it, displayed in the political sphere with respect to Walsh's and other people's demands that American politicians look first and foremost and only, as would be the reasonable thing to do, for the interest of the people that they say to represent. Because when you think about it, common sense dictates that if you're going to elect a politician to be your representative, that they would only represent your interest and your interest only and not the interests of other nations. This is why there's a lot of consternation now in right-leaning circles and not only in some left-leaning circles also. This has been going on for some time now in the left-leaning circles, but in right-leaning circles, whereas the right in America used to be very pro-Zionist, now with certain evidences that have become more known in the mainstream, they're beginning to question their allegiance to the idea of America should unconditionally support Israel. And a lot of people are giving a lot of kickback on that and trying to get a lot of these right-leaning people back into that reservation, as it were, because certain persons have begun to notice certain things. Now, I'd like for you to add your voice to this, but I thought it necessary to get at the crux of what propels these people to offer these comments. And of course, we'll begin to offer our criticisms of the matter, but I'd like to hear your take on this
in
also.
The second clip, Walsh mentions the fact that if he can do something for others, he's going to go ahead and do it. But he also talks about priorities, and this is the word that he attaches to only. I have to have my priorities in line. And the example that he gives, I kind of enjoy, I like, because he takes it to, if I have to save one of my kids or 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, I'm going to save my child. How about the 1,000,000 people? Well, again, That's the typical answer you're going to get from the person that wants to seem like he has no humanity, or that he has crucified his humanity to the point that it's almost like listening to Christ when you listen to them. Furthermore, they will quote, Gio, John 15, chapter 15, verses 13 and 14. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. There you are. That's what we should do.
So every Christian should do that. The problem is I have a difficult time finding an awful lot of.
You're not going to find it.
Right.
But here's a caveat here. Verse 14, friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you.
Right.
So if I consider the verses carefully, I come to the following conclusion. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. I'll lay down my life for you guys if I believe, if you prove that you are my friends.
There's a caveat.
He doesn't say that. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you.
There's a caveat.
And so the other point that I need to point out here comes from Jeremiah 29:7. This country is fractured. We have people from all over the world.
Right.
There is a borough in New York where 160 different languages are spoken.
Oh boy.
And that means that they're pulling 160 different ways.
That's the literal definition of a house divided.
Well, what did God tell the Jews anytime they found themselves in exile?
Preserve who you are, your identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Wrong. Jeremiah 29:7. I'm going to quote this, and then you guys decide if this is something that most Jews are doing, because I think most Jews in this country are Israel first, and most Colombians are Colombia first, and so on and so forth.
Right. So again, we continue with the whole concept that instead of having this so-called homogeneous or homogeneity filled melting pot, what we actually have is a house divided.
Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile.
Wait, what?
Also,
This is an instruction to the Jews in exile in Babylon?
also seek the peace and prosperity. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
That must have been a sour pill.
Do you think there's a principle here? Because I
Absolutely.
believe there is.
Absolutely.
Is this being fulfilled, or
No.
is it being ignored?
No, it's being ignored.
It's disobeyed, right?
What you see most of the apologists for the Israeli first, whom will not admit, because I'd like to.
But it's not just Israeli first. It's just
other
about-
nations first.
Exactly.
Right.
And then here, well, because you mentioned what happened after the Second World War. How can we continue to be a blessing to the world if we are fractured and it's come to the point where we have nothing to
You
give?
self-destruct.
Because the morality of the
Correct.
states is lower than the ground itself.
Right.
So unless we fix this, and the only way we fix it is by focusing on us.
Right.
And this is all he's saying.
You know,
And he's being condemned for it.
I was going to say something else, but I think this way is better to describe it. I find it interesting that the president, or rather the vice president of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, has the biblical concept of hierarchies with respect to loves more clearly established in his mind than many Protestants do, than many evangelical Christians do. My understanding is that J.D. Vance, at least for political purposes, he says that he's a Catholic. Most politicians will tell you, I'm of this creed, I'm of that stripe, because they're looking for votes. We don't even know if they're honest about that. However, a few months ago, I remember that J.D. Vance, he gave an explanation as to how the Bible teaches a hierarchy with respect to loves. And it makes perfect sense, because think about it. Otherwise, then we have a tangled mess with respect to priorities that actually turns in on itself. I'll explain. That way I won't make the concept too convoluted. I'm going to give the audience an example, and I would ask the audience to answer the question as I am giving you the hypothetical. Suppose that you have a choice between feeding your family, that the situation is very dire, and you had the choice as to whether or not to feed your children or your neighbor's children. Who are you going to choose? I'm hoping and I'm praying, and I'm going to give you my answer in this, I'm going to feed my children first, because the responsibility with respect to the hierarchy that Christ himself has established for the family, is that I'm supposed to be a protector, a provider, a presider, among other things, for my family. Lest, well, you mentioned this in one of the most recent episodes, if I don't provide for my family, I have become worse than an infidel.
But the virtue signaling crowd is going to say, I'll take what little we have and I'll split it. But you presented the hypothetical. You have to make a choice.
You have to make a choice, right?
Because I could also say, if you have that amount that you can split it, why not just feed your kids today and then tomorrow? But the point is, and this is the reason why I mentioned the virtue signaling, these people will tell you, no, I will split that between my kids and those kids. And you know they're not going to do it.
They're not going to do it because they inherently understand, and this is something that they put in practice. The problem is they want to look a certain way and have the good opinion of others. Look at how beneficent, look at how benevolent this person acts to others, when the fact of the matter remains is that, again, I go back to the essential point here. There is a hierarchy in these things. And if that hierarchy is disturbed or even disobeyed, now you're running afoul, as it were, of the way that God's created order works in these things.
So let's go to the Bible. We have 10 virgins. 5 of them were diligent. 5 didn't care about anything. No cares in the world. It's time to meet the bridegroom. He's coming in and the party's about to start. Oh, we don't have any oil. Can we have some of your oil?
And
nope.
Yeah, but I see where you're going. Under today's sanctimonious Christian, they would say to the 5 that were prepared aptly, well, why can't you share? Why can't you share?
They answered that because when we're going to run out.
But here's the interesting thing.
All 10 of us are going to run out.
Jesus, to your point, he doesn't denounce the 5 who did prepare adequately. He denounces those that didn't prepare adequately. So this is
the honesty we get from Christ all the time, and he lays down the principles. You had the time to do the right thing. Now you can't expect someone else or demand that someone else pick up your slack.
That's
not going to happen. And I shouldn't feel bad. Now going back to what Mr. Walsh here is stating, I shouldn't feel bad just because I'm pulling for my kids, I'm pulling for my family. I'm actually doing what God has commanded me.
Correct.
Now, if I have enough, if I have leftovers, do not legislate or don't put me under an obligation via legislation. Let it be born out of the kindness of my heart.
Right, because now when it's enforced, it's no longer charity. Because my understanding and your understanding, we've spoken on this before in private and in public, Paul himself says that God loves a cheerful giver, not begrudgingly, not out of any, as it were, enforced obligation or things of that nature. God loves a cheerful giver. But guess what? That principle, alongside with what Jesus teaches about not letting our right hand find out what our left is doing and vice versa, has been turned on its head. And now the exhibitionism is the thing that demonstrates your so-called benevolence and charity and whatnot. Things are so twisted in our generation that Christians have actually adopted the twisting of the scripture as scripture and not what the Bible teaches us about these things.
You know why I mention other nations? Because a lot of people think, well, maybe Gio or maybe Jesus has an issue with Israel, and this is why they are bringing the topic. I've seen this thing with so many nations that I lost count.
Yep.
It's not just a Jewish situation, Israeli situation. There are people in this country, in this state, in this county, in our neck of the woods that are more aware of what is happening politically, spiritually, in their nation, even though they're here, than what is happening here. Is that not weakening us?
Yes. That's a way to undermine the nation that they currently reside in.
The biggest moneymaker for Mexico, what do you think it is?
Remittances. I think that's what they call them politically, from people that have come here illegally and legally and sending the money back to Mexico.
Bingo.
Right.
And if a lot of the work that is landing in Mexico happens to be subsidies that we are giving a lot of the workers here,
right?
What are we doing? We're actually hurting ourselves.
Correct.
So I don't see anything wrong with what Mr. Walsh mentions.
Here's another way to look at this,
Mm-hmm.
and this is to clarify this for the audience even more. Think about it. If it gets to a point where now you're favoring your neighbor, we're going to look at it in principle, your favor at the expense of yourself, your family, your loved ones, your personal interest. Now you're actually, and this is something that you mentioned in another context, but it still rings true, then you're actually causing damage to the one who can and is doing the benevolence, Gio, repeat that again, just so I can have that clear in my mind. I'll repeat it again. Think about it. If you continue to demand upon the person that can do the charity, that can engage in the benevolence, that their responsibility is not first and foremost to those of their own household, but to strangers, to neighbors. And even then, one has to be careful with the extension of that term to people, because not everybody is a stranger. Not everybody is a neighbor. We have to be very careful whom we classify as those things, because those are very specific terminologies used for a very specific definition set. And if we just apply that willy-nilly, like most sanctimonious Christians and leftists and others will use, then you're in a heap of
Not
trouble.
all people are truly impoverished.
Correct. Correct. The problem here is that once you start putting those demands that now you have to think about others more than you think about yourself, that's actually inherently anti-gospel. And I know what some of you are thinking, but Jesus did that. Let me ask you all a question that think that way. Are you the Savior of the world? Are you a co-redeemer with Jesus Christ? Because in essence, if that is your thought process, then you think that somehow you are like a co-redeemer with Jesus Christ. And last I checked, the only redeemer, the only Savior of the world is Jesus Christ. Let's look at it from another angle. If suddenly you stop providing for those of your own household in the name of, I'm going to help my neighbor and I'm going to help the stranger, you don't think God is going to call you to an account for respect for ignoring family matters, domestic issues, issues with respect to your local community and whatnot, like preaching the gospel? You don't think he's going to call you to an account for that? This from a people, and I'm talking about the comment section, from a people that if we were to gather, poll them and ask them, are your children obedient in the Lord? I think a lot of them would say, I don't know if I want to answer that question, because they know what we're getting at. They wanted to showcase to other Christians how great they were by giving to missions and participating in missions and whatnot, that they forgot the first and foremost ministry that they should have tended to, which is their own children. That's just to give you an example. So these things are, and I hate to use the term, but I'm going to use it because it gets to the point. These things are necessarily screwed up in Christians' minds.
So if I destroy myself or I allow others to destroy me, how can I help others?
You can't.
You're in a flight. You're about to take off, and just before you do, the stewardess, the flight attendants, the community of lesbians and gays that engage in flight. Anyway, what is one of the instructions that you receive in case the cabin loses pressure? These masks will drop. Who's got to put on the mask first? Mom, dad, or get one on the child?
Usually the rules work. That's children, women, and then men last.
The instruction that I hear over and over just before the flight start is get your own mask on, because if you don't, then you can't help
the other person. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's selfish. No, that's intelligent. That's smart. If I can't help you,
because I'm incapacitated, to your point.
So I'm going to help myself here for a moment, and then I'm going to help you. If I allow you or anybody else to destroy me, I can't help anybody. So again, I'll say it one more time. I see absolutely nothing wrong with what Mr. Walsh mentions. The problem is the people that want to deny truth and they want to deny their humanity in the other side of this argument, they are virtue signaling.
Yes.
They are thinking, look how spiritual I am. I am going to say that I will sacrifice myself for them, when we all know, because we've seen it 1,000 times, it plays over and over and over again. They'll say one thing and they'll do another. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I think we're talking about behind the scenes, we're talking about dual loyalties. I don't think that works. And Jesus said it does not work.
Right.
You either serve God or you serve mammon. You will love one, you will hate the other. I think the principle here is very clear.
I agree. It's applicable here. So the concept of what we're saying here is that the concept of dual loyalty is a false one.
Absolutely.
It's not a true, as it were, dichotomy, as Christ mentions it, and you just quoting Christ. One last point here, folks, and I think this is important to emphasize over and over again, just to ensure that we have a proper baseline for our understanding on these principles that should have an extension into our existence. Whenever you see these persons vocalizing these sorts of things, we are in essence talking about a people that have been, I'll use a phrase I used earlier, browbeaten into thinking that the Christian way, it's more of a sentiment, it's more of a feeling than it is an understanding of truth and knowledge of the truth, is that they should, as it were, give of themselves every what they necessarily have at any given point, as it were, even though they don't necessarily do that in practice, because it's the so-called Christian thing to do, because Jesus himself did it. Now, I find this interesting. They'll quote things such as, the Son of Man himself said that he had nowhere to lay his head. The Son of Man, he abandoned everything to come to us to die for us. But I find it interesting that the very Son of Man who didn't have anywhere to lay his head is going to have a kingdom. He's going to be a king of that kingdom. And he still says that everything that he created, the earth and everything that abides in it, still belongs to him. So obviously, and he has given us these things as to be stewards
Paul
over them.
explained that he impoverished himself. This is what he chose to enrich us.
Right. So then we have all of this, but that doesn't seem to add on or compute into the general conclusion that these Christians are coming to arrive at these
They're
points.
accusing us of being selfish
Right.
if we think this way.
Right.
But again, if I open a business, of course I want it to thrive and flourish and produce so that my family can have, but I'm going to employ people.
Right.
And the products or the services that I provide, these are going to help people. Where's the selfishness in that? In other words, I have to do it just like a bohemian. It's just for you, for
That's a
you,
good
for
way to-
you, for you, for
That's
you,
a
for
good way
you,
to describe
and
it.
nothing for me. That's just not going to work. That is not going to work.
And let me ask you this. What happens then to the responsibility of the representatives of these people that belong to other countries? Why can't they take care of their own? Why do we have to be the caretakers of the
I'm
world?
glad you bring it up, because at the end of the day, some of the people in this country are just tired of having shared so much, given so much, and what have they gotten in return?
An entitlement mentality.
You haven't given enough.
Right.
You guys are the evil of
Right.
the world. You guys are the spiteful. You are the worst. And they're sitting like, wait a minute. We've shared from everything that we have,
Yep.
and this is what we get. And now they've decided, enough. We're going to fight back. And I think you fight back in righteousness,
Right.
and you will be okay. If you fight back in the flesh, you're going to have issues. But this is a well-stated idea. It's fighting back, pushing back in righteousness, and I don't have an issue with it at all.
Yeah, correct. I completely agree here. I'll leave you folks with this. There was a clip that was circulating around social media. We're not going to play it all because, frankly, the guy's a doofus. But he was calling.
I thought he was a dirtbag.
That's that.
So
We
it's
we
somewhere
can
in there?
use all of those pejoratives if you'd like. The guy's a doofus, and he thinks that he makes a proper argument here. But I've noticed that one of the things that a lot of these influencers tend to do is that they will scout out whatever position they think is necessarily popular to continue to have access to power, and also whatever they think is popular at the moment. It doesn't matter how many times they contradict themselves in the space of a week, a month, or a year, or years. Case in point, this guy produces a video where he says, now all of you morons and retards that are saying America first and America only, you have to understand it's always been MAGA. MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. You guys got it wrong. And the one who gets to define MAGA is Trump,
That's
among
not
other
even
things.
his statement. That's not even Trump's statement. He didn't really coin that.
Which also talks about how Trump insults the intelligence of his voters, of the people that idolize him, that worship him. And they don't even take the time to question whether or not their intelligences are being
He straddled
collectively
himself
insulted.
on an idea that had a root beginning, a real startup from the root system. And he said, oh, I think I could ride that all the way to
He
the
did.
presidency. And then Trump being Trump saying, it's mine. I started it. I coined it. He saw the movement and he straddled himself
Yes.
onto it.
Well, wasn't there, if I'm not mistaken, before 2016, I think he had even admitted that he had read one of Ann Coulter's books with respect to immigration, and that he picked up that was a hot topic
Yep.
amongst the right, and that's why he decided to use it as a central campaign promise back in 2015. So your point is well taken. But I wanted to get to this point with respect to that because it fits in, it dovetails in with what we're talking about this evening. Folks, think about this for just a few seconds. You've got a guy here whom, in essence, stole without giving credit to people that had used that phrase previously. And then he continually repeated that on X, on Truth Social, in campaigns. In one of his inaugurations, he said, we have to be America first, America first. He kept saying it over and over again. But now, since people, his own voters, are holding him to account to his campaign promises, which he has backpedaled on and are violating, now he wants to shift the goalposts and make the people whom are holding him to account to be the idiots, the nasty followers, those that aren't loyal to him, et cetera, when he's the one that is being disloyal. Think about that in the context here of what it is that the voters are demanding. The simple demand is we want our representatives to have our interests in mind. Exactly, to represent us. Why? Because our representatives have stopped doing that, and it's harming the country. So it gets to the point where now some will say, but what is the connection to the gospel and the thought about this? It is the gospel, as it were, twisted, perverted, taken to places that it was never meant to be taken, mainstreamed, and now it's actually coming back to harm us.
So I want all these people that are continuously virtue signaling to answer one question. How come when it's important for the United States of America to get involved in a situation on the other side of the world, how come that is called, it's something we have to do because it's in the best interest of America?
Of America.
That's okay.
Right.
But if it happens to be something that we need to do here at home, now we're just a bunch of carnal Christians that don't understand what it really means to love thy neighbor.
Exactly. And I think you've said this before. I know I said I was going to say the last thing a few times, but it's just a lot of good points are being brought
It's
here.
like the last tour with all these bands. The next to last, the penultimate, the one that's finally going to bring
This
it
is
to a
not the final
conclusion.
farewell tour. It's a series of farewell tours.
And then there's the goodbye,
Exactly.
which is different according to them
Exactly.
than the farewell tour.
But you've mentioned this before, and it's a very pithy way, very succinct way of saying it. Suddenly, when you are making something that is true charity and benevolence, and now you're turning it into an obligation, it turns into something completely different. And it also
Again,
exposes.
it seems to be okay if we get involved in a situation way out there somewhere because it's in the best interest of America. But if it's here at home, we can't have that same mentality. Somewhere along the line, we embrace duplicity. And I think we need to keep that mentality that, I'll bring up the point that you brought up earlier, proved to be beneficial after the Second World War. Well, why did we get involved?
Yes.
It was in our best interest. So whatever our best interest is, we must prioritize that. And this is the only way we can help others. If we self-destruct, we help no one.
Yes. Well, folks, that's what we have for you this evening on Irrespective. We hope that it has helped you to understand, to see the dynamics, the things at play behind the scenes. Because as we said before, there's always something playing behind the scenes. The presentation is just the presentation. There's always ulterior motives in the back. I'll use an example to prove my point. I said on X, on my account, just a few short hours ago, that it seems to me that the whole 180 that Trump has had on the Epstein files, where 4 months ago he was filibustering, and now suddenly he says, I don't care, release them all. Seems to be more than anything else a dog and pony show to begin to control the narrative, because he has lost the plot and his poll numbers are suffering. By his own admission, by the way, he himself has admitted that he's seen the poll numbers and he knows what is happening to his support in the country. Now what happens? They supposedly, speedy, almost unanimously, they pass the votes in the House of Representatives and the Senate to open the Epstein files.
They have 30 days to get the information out on a searchable website.
But now, did you see what Speaker Mike Johnson is saying? He's saying that the Senate didn't amend it the way that he wanted to, because as I had presumed and I had a suspicion of, that Trump had begun to receive assurances in the background that certain names or events or certain items that were probably inconvenient for somebody or something that he's protecting, he doesn't want out there. And now the way that the legislation is passed now, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, at her discretion, she can just begin to redact stuff out there where the information doesn't necessarily get out there, sir. It's a dog and pony show. They did a presser today about it, and she was very ambiguous about the whole thing.
She was stuttering at one point.
She was stuttering, because that tells me that there's something else going along. This is making them look as bad as it should. Here's the other point. They asked Mike Johnson, and he was in a rush to get away from the press poll. I was trying to interview him on the matter, the Speaker of the House. He says, I still have concerns, and I voiced my concerns with Trump because there are things that are wrong here, and he shares those concerns. And when they ask him, what are those concerns? We just have to make sure that those concerns are addressed. There's something nefarious happening here, folks. My point is, it's always the dog and pony show. You have to be discerning in these things. There's always the final presentation. And even in social media, the same thing happens. But there's always ulterior motives.
Just told the Department of Justice, release everything.
Right.
We didn't have to go through all of this.
Exactly.
Johnson said, I'm not in favor of this. I'm going to vote for it, but I'm not in favor of it, because I am hoping that the Senate takes care of it. Well, the one that's going to take care of it is the Department of Justice by saying this cannot be shown. That needs to be redacted for the safety of the kids, the people, whatever.
Right.
We're just going to get more fat. That's
Exactly.
all we're going to get.
Exactly. Folks, we would encourage you to join us on Sunday for our next transmission, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. By the way, for those of you that don't know, you might be subscribed. You might be watching us for the first time. Please remember to subscribe. If you enjoy this content, hit the notification bell and also click on the thumbs up so the algorithms were to pick up on the organic interest on wherever you're watching this, whether it's through X, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through Rumble. Please remember to do that. Also, do not forget to donate. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen there. You can scan that with your phone. Conversely, there's a link beneath the video player to be led to PayPal's website where we process those donations and patronages. Also, last but not least, do not forget to follow us on X at Irrespective77. There is the username. On Sunday, we'd like to take up a very non-controversial issue because we're practically tired of taking up controversial issues on the last couple of episodes of Irrespective, and some people have gotten angry with us. So we said, you know what, let's keep it very light for Sunday. What we're going to talk about on Sunday is more specifically how the church has been discipled into not calling out women's sins. What do you think?
Not controversial at all.
Not controversial at all. So that's what we're going to talk about on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we hope that you'll join us. I know the caveats and the but why, it's always the cornering, right?
I have to say this one more time. Some people are used to the typical biblical program. Today, we will be taking a look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the first 3 verses, and we are going to do and carry on an exegesis of these 3 verses. What you and I are trying to accomplish here is very simple. We're trying to help Christians navigate the hour that God has chosen us for. And so if you can't see the fact that we are using verses and explaining them and bringing them into the situational dialogues or the situations that we are encountering, then we don't know how else to help you. I guess you must go back to your sing 3 songs, listen to some AI sermon and give your offerings and go home. We're actually trying to help you navigate the waters of the hours onto which God has called you.
Yep.
That's what we are trying to do. So if it seems to you like we're tackling issues that have to do with everyday living, that's exactly what we are trying to do. You will notice that we bring in the verses and the explanations. In this way, hopefully you can navigate these very difficult waters.
Join us Sunday once again. There it is on the screen. Why doesn't the church denounce women's sins? That's what we're going to talk about on Sunday.
I don't think women sin.
They're perfect. Absolute angels. That's all the time we have left for this edition.
Only men sin. That's what the wives tell us all the time.
Exactly. For Jesus, this has been Gio. Until the next occasion that we gather, we hope that you have a good evening, and we'll see you again on Sunday. God bless.